Hello, everyone. My name is Derek Cameron. I work on the Code Innovate team along with Stephen Nichols. Code Innovate's a one-week event that pairs technical experts with you to co-develop a first-pass prototype solution to your use case. It's all free, and we have a nice, fun format. The goal is to jumpstart the building of a solution to your use case. Check out the link there for Code Innovates. So today I'll be talking about demystifying Apex logins. If you've worked with Apex before as a developer, you'll realize there's times when it's a bit odd or a bit unusual. You find changing passwords creates problems getting back in. I also realize that working with some of the Apex developers, they didn't really understand what was going on under the covers if they chose, for example, to create a workspace off of a new schema versus an existing schema. So really it's not meant to be covering Apex application authentication. It's really for someone who wants to understand during development, when you create a workspace, you're using database accounts. I work with databases all the time. What is happening? In particular, what is the relationship between the database passwords and the Apex passwords? To do that, we're going to create a workspace and a new developer with using a new schema. We'll take a look under the covers what's going on, and then we'll create a workspace, an Apex workspace, and a new developer with an existing schema and take a look at that. It's going to be fairly short. It's going to be mostly hands-on. So let's get started. We'll access Apex as usual through the menu. We select Oracle Database, Autonomous Database. I'm using an Apex instance off of my Autonomous Database, but of course you have Apex separately as its own service if you wish to run it that way. This is my database here. We'll go into Database Actions, view all database actions. And when we want to access Apex, go down to the Apex tab here, select Apex, and let's log in. We're going to log in as the internal user, the administrator that manages all other workspaces in an Apex installation. So it's internal, admin, and there's the password. And you'll see here, manage workspaces, existing workspaces. We have 3. We're going to create a new workspace. And the new workspace, we're going to go with a new schema. And the workspace name, I'm going to call it Apex Space 1. Workspace username, I'm also going to call Apex Workspace 1. And we'll give it the password, and we'll create the workspace. Let's log out, and we'll log back in as the new workspace administrator. So let's go here. We're going to sign out. We're going to return to the sign-in screen. This is called Apex Workspace 1. The user ID is Apex Workspace 1. We've got the password, and we're in. So let's take a look on the database side. What has actually happened here? We've got the database administrator, and let's refresh the users and see what was created. We have this workspace user that was created. It's the username with the same name as the workspace name. But we've also got one down here. So when you elect to use a new schema, Apex creates a second schema. This schema here has a defined list of permissions. The other workspace is the developer. It has no permissions at all. And so let's take a look at that. So we're going to select from the DBA sysprivs, where grantee is equal to this user down here. Let's take a look at that. So this was created by Apex. All these permissions were given by Apex. If we were to look at the database or the Apex developer username, which is this one here, we'll see what that one has. And it has no privileges. In fact, it does not even have the privilege to create a session. So let's take a look at that. We'll go into properties, and we'll just change this to Apex Workspace 1. And let's do a test. You'll see lacks create session privilege. So what we're going to find as we move through these different examples is that all database or all Apex developers are database users. They're database users with 0 privileges. So we'll cancel out of there. And so if we try to connect to Apex Workspace 1, it doesn't have create session privileges. The other really interesting thing is if you try to connect to this user down here with the password that you gave it when you created the workspace, it will say invalid password. So you don't even know what the password is for this user here. It has session privileges, but you don't actually know what the password is. We'll go to properties again. And in this case, we'll go WKSP Apex Workspace 1. This is the password test, and it's got invalid username and password. Well, the only password that I know is the one that I gave it when I created the workspace. And this was created by that workspace, but you do not know what the password is. So let's go back into Apex. And we're going to go here, and we're going to go change my password. And so you've got the current password here. But the really confusing thing I found was that if you didn't actually set the email address, which I didn't, it defaults to the Apex developer username, and it'll fail when you try to change the password saying that the email is incorrect. I think it would be more helpful if the screen actually showed this in front, but in any case, you'll have to do that at o.com. It doesn't actually have to be valid, but it has to have a something.com on the end of it, and at something.com. There's the password. Let's change the password to a different one. Apply changes. Now, we have just changed the password. We should be able to log in with that password. That would make sense. So let's go in here. We're going to sign out. We're going to sign right back in with the new password. So Apex Workspace 1, user ID Apex Workspace 1. We'll put in the new password, and it fails. That makes no sense to me. Let's try the old password. Now we've changed the password, but let's just go back in with the old password. And we're back in with the old password. So it appears that the password change did not seem to make any effect at all. Let's change the password for this user in the database. That's this user that has no permissions, not even create session permission. We'll change the password in the database. So we'll go here and we'll go. So now that we've changed the password for the corresponding database, let's try logging in again with that password. I'm going to sign out. I'm going to sign back in. I'm going to use Apex Workspace 1. And let's use the new password now that we've changed it in the database. It's the new one. And we are in. So conclusion, we'll look at this with an existing schema scenario as well, but it does not seem to have any effect if the user is a developer. That's a key thing to point out. This has to be a developer, because if the user is not a developer, database schemas don't get created. They only get created with developers and administrators. So when you create a developer, it's going to create, if you create 5 developers, you're going to get 5 database user IDs created in the database, and all of these users will have passwords, but will have no other privileges, and you'll have to basically change the passwords. If you want to change the developer passwords in Apex, don't do it in Apex. do it on the database side. Well, let's create a new database, a new Apex user, because we've been using the one that was created with the workspace. So we'll go back into Apex here, and we'll go in and here, and we're going to go manage users and groups, and we're going to create a new user, and the user is going to be Apex Workspace 1 dev, and we need a proper email address, and we'll give it our password down here. Okay, new developer. We have to make sure user is a developer. Make sure that's checked. And we've got the email address in here. Create a user. Now we've created the user. Let's see what happened on the database side. I think you'll know where I'm going with this. Right click, refresh. There it is there. Again, this is another developer. And again, without any privileges at all. So we should be able to log in now with the password. So let's go in here. We're going to log out. We're going to log back in here. Workspaces, Apex, Workspace 1. This is the dev user now. This is the password I gave them. And we're in. Now, again, I said don't change the password for the developer in Apex, change it on the database side. So let's do that. Alter user, Apex Workspace 1 _ dev. We've changed the password. We have not changed the Apex password. Let's log out and let's log back in as that developer. And we will see that you can get in without changing with the new password, without making any changes to Apex itself. So Apex Workspace 1, it's the dev account. Let's put in the new password. We know it's the new one. It's a little bit shorter than the original one. Sign in. And so there you have it. Passwords are maintained by the database, even though there is a change password option in Apex itself. So just a couple of other things to point out when you're making changes to the database. If you drop these users, obviously you will not be able to log in with those development user IDs in Apex. Now, again, something a little bit puzzling. Now, if you drop this schema, which is the one that holds that has certain rights and privileges, you can actually log in, but when you go to create an application and import a table, it writes to this workspace. It creates the table in this workspace. This is the map schema, and it creates a table in that workspace. You can log into Apex, but you can't actually build an app that has to write or make any changes to the database. In my own environment here, I do a lot of demo work, and I created a development user called Derek. I looked at it and I thought, hey, what's this schema doing here? Let me delete it. Like, I dropped these schemas, and I didn't really know why it was there until later. I realized, no, that was an Apex user. Then, of course, I tried to log in with the Apex Derek development user, and I couldn't log in. And so that's the kind of thing that you could watch out for, is like, has anybody made changes on the database side independent of the Apex instance? Now let's move on to creating a new workspace with an existing schema. So we'll go back to Apex here. We're going to log out, and we're going to log back in as internal, and we'll create a new workspace, but we're going to use an existing schema. So we'll create a workspace, use an existing schema. Database user is Apex Workspace 2. We'll leave the workspace name as Apex Workspace 2. Okay, let's create the workspace. And let's go back and take a look and see what happened on the database side. You'll notice the Workspace 2 created message on SQL Developer. I created that previously prior to creating the workspace. It only has DW role permissions. When we drop down here, because we've used an existing schema, you do not have that WKSP workspace schema created. The second schema, this one here that we dropped, if we had created a new schema, it would have created two schemas, one the developer user schema, and then the other one privileged. Now we don't need to actually create this one. You'll see that the developer user and the Apex schema are one and the same. This one already has permissions that I gave to it. I'm going to do development work in here. So right off the bat, you can see that if you do use an existing schema, you'll at least save one schema. You won't have to create a new one, and the developer can be the same, actually the same user. So let's move on. So in the normal course of development activities, it wouldn't be too uncommon if this being an existing schema hold a bunch of tables with table data, someone might actually change the password. So you can see that if we go back into Apex, and so let's log out. Let's log into the new workspace, workspace 2. It's Apex workspace 2. And we've got the password there. And so we see that we've been able to log in. As we saw with the other one, if we want to change the password, if someone changes the password on the database side, and let's do that. So now we've changed it. Let's go back out, sign out, log in. Workspace is Apex workspace 2, Apex workspace 2. And in this case, we're going to use the new password, sign in. So there you have it. Again, reinforcing the point I made earlier is that we're going to maintain passwords in the database. In this particular case, the developer and the Apex schema are one and the same. Let's create a new dev user. We're going to create a new user, Apex workspace 2 dev. We'll use the same name for the email address at o.com. Passwords we will give one that I've been using it. And again, user is a developer. If you don't check this, no schema will be created and it'll be using Apex authentication. So we'll create the user and we'll go back to here, right click, refresh. And there it is there, Apex Dev 2. All right. We'll do one more thing before we finish this. We will create a new app with the new user. And you'll see that even with dev here, that the table will be imported into the workspace schema, the one that has privileges. So let's log in with the dev user. So we'll log out. And the workspace is Apex workspace 2. It's Apex workspace 2 dev. Remember, the user that has no privileges will log in with the dev user. And we're going to go to App Builder, create a new app from a file, choose the file, go to Documents, Sample Data, select, and we give it a table. We'll just call it Sales. And you'll notice here it's the table owner is Workspace 2, not Workspace 2 Dev. So let's load the data. It's running. So the table is already created. Right click, refresh, go down here. This is the developer user. This is the workspace schema, the tables. There's sales. We've got a few errors in the sales, but the point being is that one of the schemas has privileges and holds the tables for anything developed in Apex. Other schemas that are developer users have no privileges. So when you create tables, they're not going to be created in the developer schema, but the passwords are maintained here. And if you choose an existing schema, you can actually have the developer and the schema holding any tables that are created to be one and the same. Now let's go back to the application we just created. You recall at the very beginning, I had said that this was a focus on application developers and the password changes and how that works. However, when you change the password in here to log in as a developer, you need to use the database password. But of course, when we create apps, we want to test them, right? So we have this sales app here. And so if I change the password, remember, as a developer, I will not actually log in with that password, but as an application user, tester, same person, but with a different password now, it's now the application password. So let's change the password now in Apex. We'll change it. So we have the same user as a developer. They're using the database password. As the application tester, they're going to be using this new password that I applied in Apex. So let's look at that. Okay, so let's test the application now. We're going to go in with our dev user ID. And now the application password, it's the new one I just assigned. So now we have the application login, same user, new password assigned in Apex. It uses the Apex password. When we log in as a developer, we use, and we go down here, page 1, app development. In here, we actually use the database password. Hope you found this helpful and perhaps less confusing in the future when you have issues with passwords. Thank you.